to the posts, another in the middle, and a third on the outside. Similarly, all the planets and all the hundreds and thousands of stars revolve around the pole star, the planet of Maharaja Dhruva, in their respective orbits, some higher and some lower. Fastened by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the machine of material nature, according to the results of their fruitive activities, they are driven around the pole star by the wind and will continue to be so until the end of creation. These planets float in the air within the vast sky, just as clouds with hundreds of tons of water float in the air, or as the great Shena eagles, due to the result of past activities, fly high in the sky and have no chance of falling to the ground. Basically, the planets and stars are all servants of the Lord, traveling in their respective orbits. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no such thing called gravity. It is only the order of the Lord which causes everything to move in their orbits. And if the laws of gravity exist, it is certain that Krishna created them, because it is said in Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter 10th verse that this material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings.
Okay, anybody else do homework? I didn't hear Krishna. What did you say? You did not, or you did?
I don't think I got the right verses.
Well, that means you did it. That you did do your homework.
No, I don't think I got the right verses.
What does that mean?
The verses from the Bhagavatam.
But that means you did it with the wrong verses, or that means you didn't do anything? What? You didn't do anything. Okay. So why did you say you didn't get the right verses? Was that just to make up an excuse why you did nothing? Okay, that's a verse. Okay, so basically you're saying you didn't do your homework because you did write down the verses, but you didn't look at them. Oh, you did? Okay. You're saying that you didn't do it because you didn't understand those verses?
I couldn't find really anything about
Okay. Okay. Well, then Shasta didn't refer to those verses. Yeah, she did her homework by looking at other places, which you didn't do. So next time you look at other places, right? Do some research. Anybody else do homework? No? No? Okay. Okay, so obviously this is a complicated subject, and it's not. Well, the easy answer is Krishna is controlling everything, right? But how is he doing it? That is what we're going to discuss now. So we heard the scientist's explanation. The law of gravity is based on the mass and movement of planets. So basically, it's the sun that's controlling the law of gravity because it has the biggest mass, or they assume it has a huge mass. Mass means, how much material is in it, and the density of that material. And that, so we did talk about how many times bigger than the Earth is the sun? 109, yeah, times bigger. So that's the size, but how about the mass? It's 109 times bigger than the Earth, but mass is the density of the matter, right? So when we talk about the Earth is very interesting because when you go down through the crust of the Earth into this, let's say, approaching the center of the Earth, there's a lot of different let's say layers that you go through. Obviously there's oil in the Earth, right? because they're extracting oil from the earth. And when they take oil out of the earth, they put water back in to replace it. But water is unbelievably denser than earth. So, you see, there could be pockets of air, there could be pockets of oil, there could be pockets of water, there could be pockets of all different materials. It's not that when you go into the earth, you only encounter earth, right? Earth is made up of space, air, or ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So you're going to encounter all these things, and it depends on how much, oil is there, how much water is there, how much earth is there, and there's a balance of all these things, and that's also one part of the answer of how something is kept in space. Space is considered, there is air in space also, and so why is it that the earth, in the time of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, fell out of its orbit? Well, one answer that Bhagavatam gives is that the demons were boring into the earth, and because of that, it threw the balance of the earth, or it destroyed the balance of the earth with all these different elements inside of it, and then it fell out of its orbit. When they're pulling oil out of the earth, replacing it with water, they're playing around with the balance of matter that's in the earth, and that can change things. That can make it tilt more or less on its axis, and that can affect its rotational speed. That can affect a lot of things, because there's a perfect balance, obviously, of the matter inside the Earth or the planet. Then there is, just like, why does a cloud, okay, we're going to go through different reasons why planets are held in space. So number one is the mass and density of the planet. And under that, you have to count the balance of ether or space, air, fire, water, earth.
Is this the second point?
No, that's all one point. Mass and density of the planet, and under that, the balance of ether or space, air, fire, water, earth. Okay? Just like you have a certain mass and density in your body, and your body is made up of space, air, fire, water, and earth. Right? Now, whenever something swells in your body, it causes pain. That means the balance of things in your body has been changed by the swelling, and it's causing you pain. And then sometimes you have a tumor that grows in your body, right? Again, it throws off the balance, and eventually it can kill you, right? So you see, you have a balance, I have a balance in my body. When that balance is thrown off by swelling, by the change of like the potassium and sodium balance in the body. I mean, everything is balanced, and when the balance is thrown off, there's sickness, and it can cause death. And then it can also cause you to be bent over, or to just walk heavier on one side than the other. All these problems happen when the balances in your body go off because of the imbalance of the mass and density of the body. Okay, that's point one. Okay, point two. We see there's such a thing as clouds. Now, a cloud can have up to millions of pounds of water, but yet it's floating in the air, right? And isn't that a miracle, right? How is it floating? Well, the scientist's explanation is that the molecules of water are dispersed and broken up into very fine mist, and at any one point, the density of the air below it is heavier than the separated mist of the water. So therefore, it holds it in the air. But when the water molecules come back together, when the mist breaks down and then forms these heavier droplets, now that because it's come together, it becomes heavier than the air holding it up, and that causes rain and the breakup of the cloud. That's what the scientists say. We looked it up, right? This was one of our homeworks that you didn't do also. Right? So this is a second reason why things can float in space. A cloud, what is a cloud? A cloud is a huge amount of water. But if it gets dispersed into a fine, very fine mist, right, then the air can hold it up. Just like, let's say there's a heavy log, right? You can't lift the log. Let's say you break the log down into sawdust. Okay, if the sawdust is lumped together, you still can't lift it up. But if you spread the sawdust out way long like this, right, you can lift it up at any point. You can't lift the whole thing up at once, but you can lift it up at any point. So if you get a lot of people, and let's say the mass of the log was 10,000 pounds. Okay, but then you broke it up into sawdust. Well, now you have 10,000 pounds of sawdust, right? But then you spread it out big time, right? Let's say you make 1 pound bags of sawdust. So it's 10,000 pounds. So you make 10,000 bags of 1 pound of sawdust, right? And then you get 10,000 people, and each one lifts up 1 bag, and they all move in a line. Now you're moving the log. You see what happens when you break it down like that? Now you're able to move the log, but you need 10,000 people, right? Or let's say each person can carry 10 pounds, and now you need 1,000 people, and you can move it. So if you spread this mass of water out very finely, then the air below can carry it. And then all you need is wind, and then it moves. So when you have this evaporation, it's already breaking down the molecules of water from the ocean, right? And then it's broken down in such a fine way that the air below it can carry it. And then it'll start to rise. When you boil water, what happens? You see the mist coming up. Why is it going up? Because it's lighter than the air. And then when it gets up to a certain point, right, and it's spread out like this, then it becomes a cloud. Right? And then later on, because it changes the temperature, that all depends on the sun. The evaporation of the water, the spreading out of it, and then now you have areas of the earth that are colder than other areas, and that affects the movement of the cloud. Why? Because the colder areas will create a wind that pushes the cloud. So you have to know all these things. These are all basic principles of let's call it cloud and rain. So that's number 2. Now number 3. So number 1 was the mass and density of the planet, right? Number 2, explanation of a floating cloud, right? Number 3, variations of heat and cold that produce winds, or high and low density, or high and low density conditions. So this all depends on the sun. You see, the sun is the source of all energy in the universe. So Prabhupada basically is saying in Bhagavatam, there's no such thing as gravity. In other words, the whole explanation of Newton and eventually Einstein is basically nonsense. Wow. Right. But then how is it that these planets are floating? Well, now I'm giving you explanations that are somewhat based on scientists' explanations, right? But then we're going to get to the real reason. But Prabhupada also mentions it because you gave the Srimad Bhagavatam explanation, right? So the Srimad Bhagavatam explanation of real gravity is given in 523.3. The verse says, when bulls are yoked together and tied to a central post to thresh rice, they tread around the pivot without deviating from their proper position. One bull being closest to the post, another in the middle, and a third on the outside. Similarly, all the planets and all the hundreds and thousands of stars revolve around the pole star. Pole star is Dhruvaloka. That's where Dhruva Maharaj is, and Lord Vishnu is there with him. The planet of Maharaj Dhruva, in their respective orbits, some higher and some lower, fastened by the Supreme Personality Godhead to the machine of material nature according to the results of their fruitive actions or acts, they are driven around the pole star by the wind. So you got the wind. Say it. Okay, so variations in heat and cold that produce winds or high and low density conditions, right? Okay, that was in point 3. And then it says, and will continue to be so until the end of creation. These planets float in the air within the vast sky, just as clouds and hundreds of tons of water float in the air, or as the great Siena eagles, due to the results of past activities, fly high in the sky and have no chance of falling down. Now, another aspect is entered here, and this is number 4. It's principles of aerodynamics. So birds fly due to the principles of aerodynamics. Again, it's related to air. Air, if you have your wing, the wing of a bird is made in a certain way, just like the wing of an airplane is made in a certain way according to what they studied from birds. So, if the air going over the wing is like faster than the air under the wing, or something like that, I'm not giving the right explanation, but anyway. Yeah. Yeah, but what is it related to the speed of the air or the temperature of the air? Yeah. Well, what will make it lift? At a certain point, is it the speed of the air underneath is faster than the speed above? Is that it, or is it the speed above is faster than? Yeah. So there's less density above than down? Okay, so again, we're talking about mass and density, and now you're talking about speed, okay, velocity, yeah. So you have to know the principles of aerodynamics, right? Yeah. Okay, well, that would be part of principles of aerodynamics, or we have to actually add the temperature? Yeah, okay. Okay, so now we have 4 points, right? But we're getting these 4 points from the explanation of this verse, 5:2:23:3, right? So it says, these planets float in the air within the vast sky. So another point is, do the scientists say there's air in space, or do they say that space is empty? But Bhagavatam is saying there has to be air. So point number 5 is that, I don't know if of the planets, yeah, but it's saying that there's air in space also. So this is a mystery. Number 5 is a mystery point. Air in space. Outside of planets. Because the scientists are saying, I think they're saying there's no air in space. Okay. Because if there is air in space, then the principles of aerodynamics, variations of heat and cold, the explanation of floating cloud, the mass and density of the planet, it all comes into play. So then it says, just as clouds with hundreds of tons of water float in the air, or as the great Siena eagles, due to the results of past activities, fly high. So in bringing into the equation karma also. So let's put number 6. This is another karma of living entities. Due to the results of past activities, fly high in the sky and have no chance of falling to the ground. Basically, the planets and stars are all servants of the Lord. Now, here's another point. The planets, the stars, they're all personalities. They're not just a lump of matter. So that's why the karma of the living entities comes into play. So number 6 is karma of living entities because planets are persons or are or well, let's call it persons who are servants of the Lord. Okay. Basically, planets and stars are all servants of the Lord, traveling in their respective orbits. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's no such thing as gravity. It is only the order of the Lord which causes everything to move in their orbits. So, okay, so there's another point here. It gives the example of the bulls that are yoked, right? So what is yoking them? Huh? Yeah, but what is tying them together? What is it? Is actually Sheshanaga. Because in another place he talks, we'll read it now. It talks about the planets are held on the invisible heads of Sheshanaga. Sheshanaga has many heads, right? Ananta Shesha, yeah. Ananta means there's no end to him, right? And I'll show you. Let me find that verse. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 2367 to 84. Prabhupada gave a lecture on this in New York, December 31st, 1966. He says, Ananta Bhudarana, I guess he's quoting the verse. Ananta Shesha, what is known as the law of gravity, that is mentioned in Vedic scriptures as Sankarasa, who is supposed to be supporting all these planets in the air. Bhudarana Shakti means all the planets are supported by Sesha Sai. It is described in Vedic literature that he has got many hoods, just like the serpent has got hood, and each hood, each planet, all these planets are resting. Big planets, there's no question of gravitation. That is nonsense. It is by his arrangement. It is moving in the air. So, again, he's validating that there's air in space, and there's the invisible hoods of Ananta Sesha. Again, he says, on a morning walk, May 17th, 1975, in Perth, Australia, he says, big planets, there's no question of gravitation. That is nonsense. It is by his arrangement. It is moving in the air. Just like big cloud containing millions of tons of water floating in the air. How it is being done? Millions of tons of water are floating in the air, that we see daily. So similarly, all these planets are floating by his arrangement. Not only floating, making center that pole star. All the planets are moving. So everything's moving around the pole star. Huh?
Even the modern science talks about the pole star and the universal axis.
Yep. So then he says, point number a part of point number 6 is karma of living entities, because planets are persons who are servants of the Lord. So to understand that, when we start talking about each different planet, you'll see that some of the planets are are in the mode of goodness, some in the mode of passion, some in the mode of ignorance. So here, when it talks about the 8 major or classical planets, so it says that Mercury is surprisingly dense because it has an unusually large iron core with only a transient atmosphere. And Venus has a carbon dioxide atmosphere 90 times thicker than that of the Earth, causing an efficient greenhouse effect by which the Venusian atmosphere is heated. The resulting surface temperature is the hottest of any planet, 477 degrees centigrade. Okay, so that explains some material aspects. But then, okay, according to the description of this verse, what verse is talking about? It's the verse that you quoted, 5, what was it, 22, whatever, when bulls are yoked together and tied to a central post. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, according to the description of this verse, the hundreds and thousands of stars and the great planets such as the Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter are not clustered together because of the law of gravity or any similar idea of the modern scientists. These planets and stars are all servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda or Krishna. According to his order, they sit in their chariots and travel in their respective orbits. So these are the persons who are managing these temples. The orbit in which they move are compared to machines given by material nature to the operating deities of the stars and planets, who carry out the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by revolving around Dhruvaloka, which is occupied by the great devotee Dhruva Maharaj. This is confirmed in Brahma Samhita 552. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whose control even the sun, which is considered to be the eye of the Lord, rotates within the fixed orbit of eternal time. The sun is the king of all planetary systems and has unlimited potency in heat and light. This verse from Brahma Samhita confirms that even the largest and most powerful planet, the sun, rotates within a fixed orbit or Kala Chakra, in obedience to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This has nothing to do with gravity or any other imaginary laws created by the material scientists. Huh, interesting. Imaginary laws created by material scientists want to avoid the ruling government of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore they imagine different conditions under which they suppose the planets move. The only condition, however, is the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All the various predominating deities of the planets are persons, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also a person. The Supreme Personality orders the subordinate persons, the demigods of various names, to carry out his supreme will. This fact is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.10, when Krishna says, "This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again." The orbits of the planets resemble the bodies in which all living entities are seated because they are both machines controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, this is a very interesting point because he's comparing the orbits that the planets move in, and the planets are, it says, the orbits of the planets resemble the bodies in which all living entities are seated because they are both machines controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's comparing the orbits that planets move in to the body that we have. In other words, we have a soul, right? That's one 10,000 is the tip of a hair, situated in the heart. And the body we have is, let's call it an orbit, right? And this orbit is another way of understanding it. Is an area where the planet is moving, right? So our soul is moving around in this orbit called the body. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. So that machine is the body, right? And the orbit of the planet is compared to the body. The machine given by material nature, whether the machine of the body or the machine of the orbit, you say, or Kala Chakra, works according to the orders given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and material nature work together to maintain the great universe. And not only this universe, but also millions of other universes beyond this one. The question of how the planets and stars are floating is also answered in this verse. It is not because of the laws of gravity. Rather, the planets and stars are enabled to float by manipulations of the air. It is due to such manipulations that big, heavy clouds float and big eagles fly in the sky. Modern airplanes like the 747 jet aircraft work in a similar way. By controlling the air, they float high in the sky, resisting the tendency to fall to earth. Such adjustments of the air are all made possible by the cooperation of the principles of Purusha, male, and Prakriti, female. That's another very interesting point that we have to mention. By the cooperation of material nature, which is considered to be Prakriti, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is considered the Purusha, all affairs of the universe are going on nicely in their proper order. Prakriti, material nature, is also described in Brahma Samhita as follows. So, Shristi Sthiti Pralaya Sadhana Saktirika. So, this Prakriti is Durga Mata. The external potency, Maya, who is of the nature of the shadow of the Chit, spiritual potency, is worshipped by all people as Durga, the creating, preserving, and destroying agency of this mundane world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in accordance with whose will Durga conducts herself. Material nature, the external energy of the Supreme Lord, is also known as Durga, or the female energy that protects the great fort of this universe. The word Durga also means fort. This universe is just like a great fort in which all the conditioned souls are kept, and they cannot leave it unless they are liberated by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord himself declares in Bhagavad Gita 4:9. So this was all in the purport. Did you read that whole purport? Well, huh? Okay. So all the answers are in this purport. Anyway, we have 6 points now. Now we're going to add a few more. But let's finish reading this purport. Janma karma chime divyan. So it said, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take birth again in the material world, but attains my eternal abode, or Arjuna. Thus, simply by Krishna consciousness, by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can be liberated, or in other words, one can be released from the great fort of this universe and go outside to the spiritual world. Now we come to a major point. That is, Krishna consciousness is the solution to all problems. Now, I was talking with one gentleman that I know, and he was having a lot of problems. And problems at work, problems in the families, etc. This is a true story. So for years I've been telling him, look, you've got to get more serious about your spiritual life. And he said, yeah, I know that, but he never did anything about it. Right? So now his problems have become very acute. And I can't say all the details, but I'll just give a generalization. Generalization is his problems are so bad that this whole world is falling apart. And it's causing him tremendous anxiety. And because of that, because I kept telling him, look, you got to chant Hare Krishna. You're not going to get out of this easily. And he's like suffering. He's actually suffering, because he's seeing everything fall apart. So for someone who's been very successful in life to see everything fall apart and to feel helpless that he can't do anything about it is like the worst thing that can happen to a person. So because of the dire circumstances that he's finding himself in, he started chanting. And he became something that he never thought he could become. Humble, meek, surrendered, patient, tolerant, controlling anger, controlling all the passions. And because it's happening like that, his situation is slowly improving. He can actually see the improvement in his character, improvement in his interactions with others, whereas before, he could get away with anything because he was so powerful, right? So, and I made this point to him. I said, don't you see what's happening? I kept telling you that Krishna consciousness is the solution to everything. If you just become a pure devotee, all these problems will go away. He said, you're right. I didn't think of it like that. I said, you see, you're taking shelter, and Krishna is helping you slowly, because you slowly got into the problem. Now you're going to slowly get out of the problem. But he can see the progress. He can see that things are happening that he never thought he could do. Because most people think, it's the bad guys that win, It's the Al Capones and the Stalins and the Hitler. These are the guys, and Mao Zedong, they murder people, they abuse people, and they have power, they got tanks, they got airplanes, they got rockets and everything, and they get things done, right? But no, every one of those guys was defeated eventually, if not by Allied armies, by old age, disease, and death, right? So there's no way we can get out of this mess without becoming a pure devotee. And the example of this person is a real stark example of that fact. Right? So here it's saying that Durga is the superintendent of the material world, and her one meaning of her name is a fort. Now, a fort is a fortified building. It's hard to get in, it's hard to get out, right? But it's comparing the orbit. What is the orbit that we're in? The orbit is this body. And if we go on a bigger scale, every planet has a predominating deity. It's a person, like us. And their orbit is not just their body, it's the whole orbit. Going millions of miles around the sun, that whole orbit is their body. You see, these are big concepts. It's hard for people to realize these things. Right? Okay, so Prabhupada says, and they, like us, have this problem of being entangled in the material world, and if they can move properly in Krishna consciousness, they can get free of their orbit, just like we can get free of our orbit. Right? It is also significant that the predominating deities of even the greatest planets have been offered their exalted positions because of the very valuable pious activities they performed in previous births. This is indicated herein by the words karma nirmita gataya. For example, as we have previously discussed, the moon is called Jiva, which means that he is a living entity like us. But because of his pious activities, he has been appointed to his post as the moon god. Similarly, all the demigods are living entities who have been appointed to their various posts as masters of the moon, the earth, Venus, and so on, because of their great service and pious acts. Only the predominating deity of the sun, Surya Narayana, is an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Maharaj Dhruva, the predominating deity of Dhruvaloka, is also a living entity. Thus, there are two kinds of entities, the Supreme Entity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the ordinary living entity, the Jiva, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. So, the predominating deity of the sun, at times, when there's no other qualified person, is Surya Narayana. It's a form of Narayan. And the predominating deity of Dhruva Loka is Dhruva Maharaj. He's a jiva like us. Right? All the demigods are engaged in the service of the Lord, and only by such an arrangement are the affairs of the universe going on. Regarding the great eagles mentioned in this verse, it is understood that there are eagles so big that they can prey on big elephants. They fly so high that they can travel from one planet to another. They start flying in one planet and land in another. While in flight, they lay eggs that hatch into other birds while falling through the air. In Sanskrit, such eagles are called syena. Under the present circumstances, of course, we cannot see such huge birds, but at least we know of eagles that can capture monkeys and then throw them down to kill and eat them. Similarly, it is understood that there are gigantic birds that can carry off elephants, kill them, and eat them. The two examples of the eagle and the cloud are sufficient to prove that flying and floating can be made possible through adjustments of the air. All right. The planets, in a similar way, are floating because material nature adjusts the air according to the orders of the Supreme Lord. It could be said that these adjustments constitute the law of gravity, but in any case, one must accept that these laws are made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The so-called scientists have no control over them. The sciences can falsely, improperly declare that there's no God, but that is not a fact. What a great purport. This explains so many things. So, this adjustment of air, so there's air in the earth also, in the planets, inside, and then there's air outside. And just like Krishna is making an adjustment of the air to float clouds with millions and millions of pounds of water, he also can make an adjustment of air to float planets. But that includes 6 principles that we've seen so far. Maybe there's more, but we have 6. The mass and density of the planet and the balance of ether or space, air, fire, water, earth. Point 1. 2, explanation of flowing clouds, why a cloud will flow. Number 3, variations of heat and cold that produce winds or high and low density conditions. Number 4, principles of aerodynamics. Number 5, air in space outside of planets. Scientists say there's no air in space. Bhagavatam says there is. And number 6, the karma of living entities, because planets are persons who are servants of the Lord, and they have different types of karma. So some planets are auspicious and some are not auspicious. So which are the planets that are auspicious? So auspicious planets are auspicious planets are... Okay, Jupiter is an auspicious planet. Mars is not. Venus is an auspicious planet. Mercury is mixed, auspicious and inauspicious. Saturn is inauspicious. Yes, a little. I'm going to look more deeply into that. Okay, so did you get those 6 points? Okay, now your homework is to research those 6 points by carefully reading this verse that Shasta quoted, Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, what is it? Huh?
Canto, 23rd chapter, 3rd verse.
Okay. So I think we just read the purport, but I want you to read it very carefully and see if there's any other points besides the 6. And do research on all 6 points from the scientific point of view. Explain the principles of aerodynamics, and you don't have to go into it completely, but just get the general points. Talk about the orbit of a living entity and orbits of the living entities in charge of the planets. Sometimes it's a jiva and sometimes it's Krishna.
Original, it was Krishna?
You can look it up. When it says Surya Narayana, it's Krishna. If it says only Surya, it's jiva. Yes. Okay, did you write down the 6 points? Let me hear them.
The mass and density of a planet, the balance of ether and space, earth, water, fire. 2,
Air. I forgot air.
air. And then number 2 is the cloud example about how the cloud's molecules are spread around.
Yeah, floating. So you have to look that up. Go ahead.
And then the third point is various examples
Yes.
of high and low density.
Yeah. Huh? Principles of aerodynamics. And number 5?
Mystery, it's a mystery point. Science say there's no air in space, but Srimad Bhagavatam says there is air in space.
Okay, and number 6?
Living entities, because planets are people who are servants of the
Good. Very good. So you're going to put more explanation on that. You're going to read 523:3. And you're going to do some research.
यशोमती नन्दन व्रजवरनागर गोकुलरञ्जनकाना यशोमती नन्दन व्रजवरनागर गोकुलरञ्जनकाना गोपीपरानदन मदन मनोहर गोपीपरानदन मदन मनोहर कालिय दमन विदान आमल हरिनाममिय विलास आमल हरिनाममिय विलास विपिन पुरन्दर नविनय गरबर बंसी बदन सुवास प्रजन पालन सुरकुलनाशन ब्रजन पालन सुरकुलनाशन नंद गोदन रघुवाला गोविंद माधव नवनीत तस्कर गोविंद माधव नवनीत तस्कर सुंदर नंद गोपाल जमुना तट चर गोपी बसनहर रस रसिक कृपमोया श्री राधा वल्लभ वृंदावन नटवर श्री राधा वल्लभ वृंदावन नटवर भक्ति विनोद शाया यशोमती नंदन व्रजवरनागर गोकुलरञ्जनकाना जयो राधा नीला माधव राधा नीला माधव श्री राधे जयो राधा नीला माधव राधा नीला माधव श्री राधे जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जयो सीताराम जयो सीता Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Okay, so we're gonna finish up. There's a point 7. Point 7 is Anantasesha. And his invisible hoods. That yoke planets in specific orbits around the pole star or Dhruvaloka. Huh? What?
What were you saying after Anantasesha invisible hoods that?
Yoke, Y-O-K, yoke, because the example is there, bulls are yoked together and tied to a central point. Okay? So that means they're held in a specific formation. The hood, the invisible hoods yoke planets in specific orbits around the pole star. Point number 7. Now there might be other points that I've missed, just like thinking about it just now, I saw we missed point number 7. There might be others, so if you discover some, you bring it up next week. So now we have 7 reasons, or 7 points, that explain why planets move in orbits. Basically, there's 2 things that you have to take into consideration. 1, the karma of the jiva, and 2 is the control of Lord Krishna. So each planet is an individual jiva that has a particular orbit based on their karma. And they're held in their particular orbit by Anantasesha. So those are the 2 things, the jiva and the Lord. And in every circumstance, whether it's your body, you're the jiva, and Krishna is present as Paramatma, and your orbit is your body. Wherever you look, you're going to see these two things, the jiva and the Lord. It could be a flower, a tree, it could be anything that's living and moving. And therefore, there has to be a jiva, and there has to be the Lord. So you have 7 reasons to explain why planets move in specific orbits. So your homework is to read carefully Srimad Bhagavatam 5:23-3, and to do extra research on these 7 points, especially point 1, 2, 3, and 4, because those points have been partially studied by scientists also. So you see how studying Srimad Bhagavatam, you also study science. You learn about aerodynamics, you learn about variations of heat and cold that produce winds in high and low density areas, and in other words, how winds come about, and then the mass and density of planets. Actually, the sun is 333,000 times denser than the Earth. And the sun represents like 98 point some percent of all the density in this what do you call it? In our planetary system, galaxy, in this galaxy. So there's a difference between volume and density, right? The sun is 109 times bigger than the Earth, but it's 333,000 times denser. You see, and all these things are in play when you talk about why planets are held in space in specific orbits. And we have the example of one time the Earth fell out of its orbit. It's in the history of Lord Varaha. And why? Because the demons were boring into the core of the Earth. And it threw off the internal balance of the Earth, and it fell out of space. And you see, you have to study science. And now they're boring into the Earth in these very deep coal mines and fracking and pulling out a huge amount of oil from the Earth and replacing it with water, which is denser than oil. So they're playing around with the internal balance of the Earth. So there's 2 balances, right? You balance the air in the body, and you balance the air outside of the body. Right? And that's related to aerodynamics. So all these scientific points are coming into play in understanding, but there's other factors. Just like scientists say there's no air in space, but Bhagavatam says there is air in space. Right? Okay, Haribol. We got a lot of homework. My God, this is like PhD work here. Of course, Paramananda is not going to do any homework. He just comes and smiles. But Krishna is going to do his homework, isn't he? And I hope everyone's going to. Tulsi, you're going to do some homework? Did you take some notes? Okay, if you didn't get all the notes, ask Shrestha, she'll help you. Okay. All right, Hare Krishna. Yeah.
I'm seeing different definitions of dense all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What would be like the main definition of dense?
Density or dense?
Dense.
Just dense? Dense. Okay, well, words can have different definitions. So there's a scientific definition, and there is